Hi, my name is John Muramutu. This talk is entitled Biosecurity as a Unified Framework for the Management of Pests, Diseases and Invasive Species. 2 steps forward and no steps back. The title and subtitle of this talk will become clear as we go along. During this talk I'll outline 2 simple steps or ideas that could save millions of lives and billions of dollars. And the great thing is we can start to implement these ideas straight away. So when I discuss biosecurity as a unified framework for the management of pests, diseases and invasive species, I'll start with the what. What is biosecurity? We'll look at the so what question. So why does this matter? Why is this concept of a unified framework important? And finally, the now what. So where do we go from here? What are the next steps? How can we operationalize these ideas that are discussed? So, when considering what biosecurity is, I think it's very useful to start with an example. The particular example that I've chosen is recent and very, very tragic. It's the devastating cholera epidemic that struck the island of Haiti from 2010. I'm going to read an extract from an article from Jonathan Katz entitled In Time of Cholera that appeared in the publication Foreign Policy. Rosemont Lorimer lived in a thatch and mud hut in May, a small village on Haiti's central plateau, built along a little river of the same name. There wasn't much to do there among the bean plants and banana trees for a man of 21. You could swim or take a bath in the river, or you could help the older folks raise pigs and turkeys or plant cassava. May was a pretty quiet place. Even the earthquake that struck on 10th of January 2010 was just a groan and a rumble in May. The sickness came 10 months later. A low, hard pain formed in Rosemont's gut and radiated all over his body. Then the diarrhea began, then vomiting, torrential like a hurricane. Pain gripped his gut, and heat rose in his head and cut his intestines as if he'd eaten a stick of thorns. His stomach became a rejecting vessel. The water he drank would come straight back or go straight out. Rice did the same. Even the garlic tea and cotton leaf that the women of the village gave him to settle his stomach ended up vomited out or run out into the ground. The diarrhea kept flowing. Rosemont became thirstier and thirstier. Neighbours whispered that it must be witchcraft. The family looked for money to send Rosemont to the hospital, but it took days to find enough. Days later, weary but alive, Rosemont's brother put the slumped young man in the back of a motorcycle taxi to go to the nearby town of Mirabai. The horror was in the stomach, an empty, draining pain. All the way up the highway, Rosemont had felt like the river of life was running out of him. Under an arid sky, arms carried Rosemont into the little hospital with the green-painted walls. A voice cried out in the room. Struggling for air, Rosemont Lorimer closed his drying eyes and never opened them again. Cholera had not been present in Haiti for at least half a century, so the emergence of the cholera epidemic was a surprising development. Up to now, more than 8,000 Haitians have died, with another 647,000 people infected. That's about 1 in 5 Haitians who has fallen seriously ill with the disease. This unusually virulent strain has spread across the Caribbean, into South America and the United States. It's the worst cholera epidemic in modern history. Haiti has produced a $2.2 billion 10-year plan to eradicate cholera. This outbreak was not the inevitable consequence of the chaos that follows a natural disaster. Cholera is often associated with poverty, but poverty doesn't cause cholera. You can have the world's poorest people, the worst sanitation, hurricanes, earthquakes, frogs falling from the sky. Without the presence of Vibrio cholerae, the bacteria that causes the disease, you will not have cholera. And there hadn't been cholera in Haiti for at least 50 years. The source of the outbreak is almost certainly the poorly disposed feces of the UN soldiers from Nepal. Cholera is endemic in Nepal. The cholera in Haiti matched the strain circulating in South Asia, including Nepal. None of the Nepalese soldiers had been tested prior to deployment, and poor sanitation allowed waste from the trees to leak into a nearby river. The cholera outbreak in Haiti is a tragic and costly example of poor biosecurity. Cholera in Haiti, then, is a biosecurity issue. It is also a problem for food security. Rosemont Laurier was a food producer, and now he's gone. It would have cost only thousands of dollars to prevent this terrible epidemic. But it will cost billions of dollars to eradicate the disease from Haiti. This second example concerns the biosecurity issue in Uganda, that of banana bacterial wilt, and how it almost ruined the life of this particular lady and many like her. Mary Kubutai is a small farmer in the Mbali district of eastern Uganda. She grows bananas on 4 hectares of fertile soil. Like 85% of the farmers in the district, Mary depends on the matoke variety of banana, which is the basis of her livelihood. At the beginning of 2002, she noticed that the leaves on some of her banana plants were yellowing and drooping. The fruits were ripening early and in patches and were discoloured inside. The disease induced drying up and rotting of the plant. The disease rapidly spread to the rest of her farm and throughout the whole district. That year, all of Mary's harvest was destroyed. Farmers did not know how the disease was spreading. They thought it might be witchcraft. But in fact, the farmers themselves were unknowingly spreading the disease by using the same tools to cut diseased banana plants and prune healthy ones. Uganda is the leading consumer of bananas in Africa, and banana bacterial wilt is the country's most notorious plant disease. It's estimated that the country loses $200 million American dollars worth of bananas every year due to banana bacterial wilt. Bacterial wilt was first reported in Uganda in 2001, then spread to East and Central Africa. The disease causes the plant to wither and rot. In North Kivu, in DRC, banana production has dropped by 90%, according to Action Against Hunger, an international aid organization. Millions of farmers in the Great Lakes region of Africa depend on bananas as a staple food and a significant part of their livelihoods. Unlike the situation in Haiti, the situation in Uganda with banana bacterial wilt looks like having a happy ending. By learning the cause of the disease and a simple way to manage them, farmers in Mbali have recovered their staple crop. More than 40 community knowledge workers have been trained by the Grameen Foundation to teach farmers how to use manioc stems to control banana disease. The Foundation links farmers and community workers through text messages. They use their phones to type messages on how to combat the disease. In fields across the district, farmers read the messages on their cell phones and screens. If they have questions, they can text back and wait for a reply. Now, with the help of the Grameen Foundation and her cell phone, Mary Kubutai and other small farmers have learned the cause of the disease, and they know a simple way of stopping it. Mary learned that in order to stop banana disease, it's important to remove the male bud from the plant. This is because the male bud attracts bees and flies that spread the disease. The safest, cheapest, and most successful method of doing this is very low tech. All a farmer needs is a forked dry manioc stem to remove the male bud. Every homestead in Uganda grows manioc, so getting stems is no problem. Apart from using the dried forked stem, Mary has learned other methods of managing banana disease. Mary also has information on how to keep the disease out of her land in the future. She knows where to buy disease-free planting material and how to discourage the disease by keeping her land clean. Today, Mary Kubutai boasts 4 hectares of healthy, disease-free bananas. The farmers in Mbali have stopped the spread of banana bacterial wilt and other banana diseases, and the Grameen Foundation is replicating the project in other regions of Uganda. Clearly, banana bacterial wilt in Uganda is a biosecurity issue, and of course it is a food security issue. So what exactly is biosecurity? Well, there are many definitions, but the definition I'm going to use is adapted from FAO 2007, the Biosecurity Toolkit, which is an excellent publication. Biosecurity is a strategic and integrated approach that encompasses the policy and regulatory frameworks, including instruments and activities for analysing and managing relevant risks to human, animal, and plant life and health, and associated risks to the environment. Biosecurity also covers food safety, zoonoses, the introduction of animal and plant diseases and pests, the introduction and release of living modified organisms and their products, and the introduction and management of invasive species. Thus, biosecurity is a holistic concept of direct relevance to the sustainability of agriculture and wide-ranging aspects of public health and protection of the environment, including biological diversity. It's essentially the same definition as used by FAO. I've just changed it in one way. When we talk about invasive species here, I've removed the word alien, because effectively, when it comes to the concerns of people on the ground, there's not a huge concern whether the species is alien to the ecosystem or not. But, of course, the fact that it's alien or not has management implications. This definition can be simplified somewhat to the following. Biosecurity is the protection of all sectors from all biological threats coming from all pathways. So, why is this broad definition important? Why is it significant? The so what question. Well, it's the basis for the first simple idea, the first of the two ideas that I wish to present here. If we use this biosecurity framework to address pests, plants and zoonotic diseases, invasive species, both introduced and natives, and weeds, etc., we'll considerably increase our efficiency and effectiveness in the management of biological invasions. To illustrate why this unified framework is significant, use the metaphor of the blind men and the elephant, the story that originates in India. And you could compare that situation to the biosecurity framework that is prevalent in most countries nowadays, where individual specialists concentrate on their own specializations when it comes to biological invasions, whether it's diseases, parasites, invasive native species, invasive alien species, weeds or pests, etc. So we've got a situation where there's a fragmented, the disciplines are fragmented, and the different sectors and disciplines acted in an isolated manner. In contrast, you've got what I've termed the ideal situation, where there is a unified framework of biosecurity, and all the specialists are certainly aware of the similarities between what they're doing and the cross-cutting nature of what they're doing. But of course, they're still essential and they're still working within their fields, but they have more understanding of where their fields fit into the bigger picture, what I've called the biosecurity elephant. But you could still ask the so what question, because the situation is, it's still the case that that's very interesting, but how does that translate into on-the-ground operational issues? I'll respond to the so what question with several illustrations which may then indicate how this concept has implications for operational issues. For example, when you carry out a risk analysis for the importation of wheat, you must take into account not only of the possible contamination of seeds that may cause problems for agriculture, but also those seeds that could cause problems for the environment. In addition, you must consider, for example, the impact of diseases such as ergot, a pathogenic agent that can cause serious health impacts for people and animals. So clearly this has weed implications. There are invasive species implications, and there are disease implications. The use of a biosecurity framework in such a situation can encourage an interdisciplinary approach to the management of biological invasions, be it pests, diseases, parasites, weeds, invasive species, etc. There are also sectoral implications in the same case study. For example, the phytosanitary services would traditionally deal with seeds that cause problems for agriculture. Environmental agencies would be looking at those seeds that cause problems for the environment. And human health agencies and animal health agencies would be looking at those issues regarding pathogens that could cause impact on people and animals. So if there's use of a integrated holistic definition of biosecurity as a framework, this can encourage an intersectoral approach to the management of biological invasions. When adopting a biosecurity framework, it will allow you to be more alert to the common approaches that exist across disciplines and exist across sectors, so capacity can be shared. For example, a similar set of skills is needed to manage the risks posed by LMOs and other species introductions, but the proposed number of LMO introductions to many countries is likely to be very small. If the numbers are low, those trained in LMO risk analysis will practice very little and their skills are likely to diminish. Therefore, it's more efficient to train the same people in risk analysis techniques for both LMOs and non-LMO introductions. The use of a single framework increases the chances of mainstreaming of biosecurity issues. So, by treating all biological risks under a single umbrella, this will help mainstream biosecurity in day-to-day decision-making. It's much easier to ask, is there a biosecurity risk, than asking, is there a weed risk, is there a pest risk, is there a disease risk, etc., etc. The question, is there a biosecurity risk to this action? And if so, how can we manage this risk? Should be asked for all interventions that involve the movements of people, infrastructure and organisms, and ecosystem manipulations, e.g. species introductions, emergency relief, dam building, etc. And unfortunately this question isn't generally asked in most countries. Under a biosecurity framework, the main questions are the same, whether you're thinking about weeds, whether you're thinking about pests, whether you're thinking about diseases, etc. And these questions can be summarized below. What are the biosecurity risks of this action? What stakeholders should be concerned? What specialists should be concerned? What needs to be done? And how can you manage these target species? Do you keep them out? Prevention? Do you keep them in? Containment? Do you get them out? Eradication? Do you keep them down? Control? Or do you manage the environment? Or last but not least, you do nothing, or at least for the moment, given the current situation, the current levels of technology, finance, etc., etc. In other words, a biosecurity framework provides a simple guide for decision makers. It's a checklist within a holistic framework. Our friend here can see this idea as appealing, this idea as logical, but of course he's right, the reality is much more complex than simply adopting a framework and things happen. When we get into the real world, how exactly will we change things? As you can see from the graphic, when it comes to the real world, to adopt a holistic framework to biosecurity, a cross-cutting, cross-disciplinary framework, will demand a lot of changes. There'll be a need for training, new legislation, coordination between organizations, political support, communications at all levels, new processes, new procedures, and institutional changes, to name but some. Clearly, this is highly complex. And the danger is that such vast changes will be very bewildering and very, very difficult to implement in practice. And the consequence could be actually a worse situation than the currently prevailing situation. If it simply leads to a process of analysis paralysis, and the baby illustrates this very well, the more I think, the more confused I get. It's a danger, but I would counsel that we shouldn't get too hung up and worried about that, because you don't need to do everything at once. In fact, you can't do everything at once. This illustrated plate spinner is doing extremely well, keeping all the plates in the air at the same time, but you can see from his expression it's extremely stressful. It's certainly a worry, and it's very unlikely that he's going to have the capacity to keep those plates spinning all at once, all the time. So what I'm trying to say here is you can't do it all at once. So instead of thinking of this integrated, intersectoral approach to biosecurity as something that needs to be implemented now, you can really look at it as a vision. It's something to aim for, but at the same time as a way of thinking. So the biosecurity framework provides what could be called a destination postcard, but it's also something to use along the journey. So you can utilize this in terms of a checklist. So clearly, nobody's advocating trying to do it all at once. You're not talking about becoming a New Zealand if at the moment you have a very, very fragmented framework. You can't possibly do it at once. But there still remains the question, now what? Where do you start? Because clearly, if this is something to aim for, you must be starting somewhere. Well, there's the famous old quote from Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching, that the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. That's all very well, of course, but then how do you decide upon that first step? And what direction are you going in? And this question and this start is the basis for the second simple idea. We are not starting from zero. In fact, there are many biosecurity bright spots. So the second simple idea is find those bright spots, learn from them, and adapt them to your situation. And there are many, many examples, a few of which are listed below. The control of banana bacterial wilt in Uganda is a bright spot. The biosecurity protocols for the movement of Australian armed forces is a bright spot, and certainly the situation in Haiti would not have occurred if those protocols had been adopted in that situation. The eradication of rinderpest from the face of the earth is a bright spot. The introduction of integrated pest management through farmer field schools is a bright spot. Biological control of water hyacinth in many, many countries is a bright spot. And the great thing is that there's a lot of information about these biosecurity bright spots which is available and easily accessible. You can get information on who did what, where, and when, and what were the outcomes, what were the successes, and what were some of the lessons learned. The information is certainly not as accessible as we would ideally like in many parts of the world, but it is becoming much more accessible with each passing day. So, in conclusion, we have two simple ideas: a biosecurity framework as a holistic, interdisciplinary, intersectoral approach to all biological invasions, and finding the bright spots and replicating them, working upon them as a basis for starting. So these represent a beginning and an end. What about the middle? Well, I'd like to close this talk with a very strong message to not be obsessed by the middle. And this is a quote from Chip and Dan Heath from a book called Switch, How to Change When Change is Difficult, and this would certainly apply to biosecurity in many parts of the world. And I think it's very pertinent in this case where you're dealing with something highly complex. You don't need to anticipate every turn in the road between today and your destination. It's not that plotting the whole journey is undesirable. It is that it's impossible. When you're at the beginning, don't obsess about the middle, because the middle is going to look different once you get there. Just look for a strong beginning and a strong ending and get moving. So I think on that note I'd like to close, and I would be very, very grateful for any reaction that this talk engenders. Thank you.